this security threat of mass hundreds of thousands of Trump supporters storming the Capitol was all kind of made up. We are walking into extremely dangerous territory. I've been warning you now for a long time. I've been warning you in a hyper-attentive mode for the last 2 weeks that the thicket we're walking into is extremely dangerous. We now have what are perceived by liberals, not by sane people, as mainstream commentators. They're not, they're psychopaths, but perceived by liberals as mainstream commentators on Twitter, Facebook, and elsewhere, calling for extreme censorship, the evaporation of civil liberties, re-education facilities for Trump voters, worse than book burning, not even getting books printed. As I always say with book burning, at least you print them first, then you burn them. They don't even want books printed. They want Fox News taken off the air. They want people put in jail by domestic spying units spying on you. None of this is a joke. None of this is hyperbolic for effect. It's actually happening right now. We are in a dangerous spot, and I want to focus on two things right now: evaporating civil liberties and what the growing support by what used to be ACLU supporting liberals, that's now evaporated. Growing support for a police state. When I say growing support, it's always been there. It's now flowering and spilling over where elected Democrats who were once perceived as sane people, that's all gone, are now openly calling for a police state and investigations of all their political opponents, perceived and real. We already know they supported the spying operation on Donald Trump, Spygate, so we know the left is an anti-civil liberties, police state, authoritarian enterprise of communists and Soviets. We already know that, but now it's getting worse. What do I mean? So I want to focus on two things, the dangerous territory again. The civil liberties we have evaporating slowly but surely, and the now growing support in the left for a police state. What do I mean? Folks, the January 6th events obviously were a disaster. A disaster. But it's now crystal clear because, again, there are no principles at stake. The principles are all agreed on. I shouldn't say there were no principles at stake. That's actually imprecise. Precision matters in language. There were no principles in dispute is a better way to say it. There were no principles in dispute. January 6th and the storming of the Capitol was a disaster. There's nobody arguing, no, this was a great thing for America. There's nobody saying that, okay? Nobody. So the principles are not in dispute. So if the principles aren't in dispute, what is the left disputing with us? What they're doing is they're taking an incident and using it now as a pretext to start other fights unrelated to this. They're pushing now and using January 6th, as a pretext to start a mass domestic spying on their political opponents. And you see people like Paul Krugman, noted ridiculosity and absurdity, the one winner of the Nobel Prize who completely discredited the Nobel Prize for the rest of its existence, Paul Krugman, actually on social media now wondering like, my gosh, we had this now relatively peaceful inauguration of now President Joe Biden. And what happened to the threats of a mass attack on the Capitol, Joe, by millions of deranged Trump supporters who we should all be spying on? Krugman's like, what happened, man? What happened? There were no arrests. In contrast, by the way, to Trump's inauguration, Joe, I think we were down there, where there were tons of arrests. There were windows being broken, cars being set afire. None of that happened with Biden. None of that happened, despite the threats there was going to be a mass storming of Washington, D.C. by millions of angry Trump flag wavers. What happened? Well, let's check this out. Here's a Krugman tweet asking the exact same thing. Krugman, noted leftist nutjob. So what happened to the insurrection? Maybe I'm jinxing it, but the wave of violence many expected didn't materialize before or on Election Day. There were hardly any demonstrators. Where did all the rage go? Then he goes on to suggest, they were just all cowards. Well, Glenn Greenwald, who's one of the few honest journalists left. Again, this guy, Glenn Greenwald, is on the left side of the political. He's not a conservative, on the left side of the political spectrum, not the right. He says, oh gosh, Paul, I hope this didn't mean the magnitude of the threat has been wildly exaggerated for political gain, media excitement and ratings. censorship orgies and laying the foundation for a new fear-driven domestic war on terror to control politics and information. Thank you, Glenn Greenwald, for being one of the few honest individuals left. I don't share much in common with Glenn Greenwald and his politics, but I deeply appreciate him having the guts to actually stand up and say, hey, it sounds like a lot of what we've been told about this mass movement of millions of angry Trump supporters engaged in a mass insurrection to storm the inauguration and take down Washington, D.C. Weird how not one of them showed up. Crazy. Must have been the most disorganized insurrection in human history. That's not to absolve anyone of responsibility on the January 6th event either. Those are separate entities, obviously. That is, as I said, there are no principles in dispute there. But isn't it weird how we were all hyped up? Remember that, Joe? We're all hyped up. There's going to be a mass storming of the country. We need 72 million National Guard troops to defend the country. Folks, listen. Again, my prior line of work, I was directly involved in the first inauguration of Barack Obama. I was the agent responsible for the portion of the inaugural parade route where Obama gets out. The photos are there, right on my wall, right there, where Obama's waving. It's not that I don't have experience with this. I'm telling you, my inside sources were like, this security threat of mass hundreds of thousands of Trump supporters storming the Capitol was all kind of made up.
You just heard Dan Bongino.